Hey guys, thanks for jumping into the pond. I'm Dog God Froglog, and we're going to be going over everyone's favorite Pantheon, the neutral Pantheon. Now there's no god for this, because everyone gets to have some neutral cards in every Pantheon. We're going to break down every one, show you what's what, and how they combo with each champ, and where you should be looking to get some value at. First off is Hive, one of my personal favorites. Can be deployed anywhere on the battlefield. At the start of your turn, deal 1 damage to all adjacent units. I'll be blunt, you're never going to use it, you're never going to get that much value from it. It's just fun to make a couple meme decks with. It's not really going to do you that much good. Next up is Basilisk. Now this is something worth considering for Beast Nuwa. All other friendly beasts have +1, +0. It's not that great on its own. It gives a little buff to other champs. It's only a 2/2. It does have the beast tag and lets you get a little bit of beast energy with like Daji, but overall it's not that great. Next up is Fire Imp. It has charge, it's a 2/1 for 2, and it's not too bad. The charge lets it get in there. Treat it like a burn spell is the best way to do it. It gets in there, it does a little bit of damage, it trades out, it does its job. Next up is Hyena. Now Hyena is a good card. Whenever a friendly beast enters the battlefield, gain +1/+1. Is essential in Beast Nuwa, but you can also get some value from some other champs like Zeus running Arachne. Every time he spawns a spider, that's a +1/+1 for the Hyena. It's a really good play. Next up is Imperial Soldier. You're gonna see this a lot in Nuwa. Whenever you play a spell, gain +1/+0 and +1 movement. You'll run into it a lot in Arena as well. It's normally a pretty good pick if you have a bunch of spells. But Nuwa gets a ton of value from this because she's always playing it. Whenever she's always has spells, she's always getting them out, she's always buffing Imperial Soldier, so it's really good. Next up is Inferno Cannon, and it is probably one of the better 2-drops. It's a 2/3. It's ranged. The only thing is it's a structure, so it's locked in place. But if you're playing Bologna, she can shuffle it around the board as much as she wants. You'll see it a lot in Arena, especially Bologna in Arena. She loves it. If you're playing against Bologna, you're going to be in for a little bit of a rough go because she can just push it out of the way and you won't have any way to bring it back into the fight. Next up is Calder. When Scotty is in play, gain +1/+0. The best way to play Calder is just to play Odin and have a Scotty, and then play the Calder off that. You don't normally see it by itself because it's very hard to activate its ability without playing Odin. Next up is Marksman. This is a card you see more often in Zeus, but a lot of people run it in Arena when they have several gods, because whenever a friendly god enters the battlefield, it gets +1/+0. Without those gods, it's not that strong. It's just a 1/2, easy to take off the board. But when you have the gods, it can get a bit of power. It can do some decent work. But the Inferno Cannon is basically stronger than it, just coming straight out as a 2/3. Mercenary. Now this is a really good legendary, and you're going to see it a lot, especially when you're playing an aggressive Odin. You're playing a Ganesh who likes to sit back and build a bunch of structures around his tower. It's very easy for these two champs to make a huge mercenary. So you're going to want to watch out for it, and if you're playing those two champs, you're going to want to craft it and enjoy it. +1/+1 for every other friendly adjacent to your summoning stone. It's very, very easy to set that up with pillars, with sigils on Odin. Even people like Nuwa, if she's playing like Zonquays in the back, she can even throw in a mercenary. It's hard not to find a little bit of value with this guy. Next up is Newbie Lion. Protect 1 and Afterlife. Give a random friendly unit Protect 1. It's okay. It trades its Protect 1 to someone else, but against somebody like Nuwa, it's just dead in the water. She can kill it for 1 mana. Zablancs kill it. There's a lot of Khepri kills it. There's just a lot of cards that deal 1 damage very easily. So it's hard to get too much value from the Newbie Lion. He's alright, but he's not too great. Next up is Scion of Doom. You'll run into this one a lot, and it's a good card. Give a friendly unit +2/+0 until the end of your turn. So you don't want to play it just by itself on an empty board. It's probably better just to pass even. And when you do play it, you're going to want to have like a 1/1. You're going to want to buff something to get that trade that you otherwise wouldn't get. It can really mess opponents up, getting the Scion out at the right time. Next up is Thracian. She's also one of the best 2-drops in the game. If adjacent to a friendly unit, has +2/+0. So Ganesh can just throw down a pillar, Alpuck can just throw down a zombie, Bologna can just push a unit forward. You can play Tusky or Satyr to run up there with it. There's so many ways to activate Thracian, and a 3/3 for 2 is just really, really good. You have to be careful that they don't remove or split up your units so that she stays as a 3/3. But as long as you can fire her off, I'd go for it. She's really strong. Next up is the White Tiger. At the start of your turn, gain +0/+1. Now, White Tiger's pretty good. The extra HP doesn't matter that much, but if you run them with an Aegean Outcast, you can easily flip them into a 4/2 or something. That's a pretty decent trade off a 2-drop. He does his job and he does it pretty well. You'll see him sometimes too in Beast Nouveau. Next up is Argus. Now this is a card that comes out fairly often in Zeus because he's playing so many gods so often, he gets a lot of free cards off of him. His damage is a bit low at 1/3, so you don't want to just grab him willy-nilly. You want to make sure that you're going to get several draws off of him. But he's not too bad. A little bit pricey at 3, a little bit weak at 1, but he does his job. Next up is Brontes, and you'll see Brontes fairly often. Brontes is just a good card. I run him in my Bologna list, for example. Whenever a friendly god enters the battlefield, gain +1/+1. Making a 4/4 or 5/5 for 3 mana is just really good. Brontes gets a lot of good trades in. He really hurts, and he's hard to play around. A lot of times, even without the gods, they're going to waste the silence, they're going to waste the answer just to get Brontes off the board while they think they can. So he's a good card. You'll probably end up using him fairly often. Next up is Chaos Spawn. Warcry, silence an enemy. It's a silence. He's a 2/3, a little bit weak in the power, but he's there for that silence, and he gets around immunity to enemy spells, so you can use him to take off that immunity. You can't silence your own units to remove effects from yourself, but you can stop your opponent from setting up some weird fancy game plan. Really good card. You'll probably be using it a lot. Next up is Clay Soldier. Afterlife. Deal 5 damage randomly split between adjacent enemies. You don't really run into this in ranked. You see it a lot in arena, just because how the picks go. The 5 damage is a little bit hard to deliver, but if you have like Bologna, for example, it's a little bit easier because you just push them over. If you can run and attack an enemy, it's basically 6 damage if he's only beside one thing. Make sure you position him correctly so he explodes how you want him to. But he can be effective. He's just really tricky to deliver to their doorstep. Next up is the Decrepit Bowman. Afterlife. Spawn 2 Decrepit Fractures in adjacent tiles. The Fractures are also 1/1 archers. They have a mana cost of 2, which might come into play with a couple cards. I don't really like the Decrepit Bowman. It's just a 1/1 archer. It gets silenced pretty easily if they want to waste a silence on it. There's better archers that you can play. The 1/1s aren't that much of a threat. Normally they'll just pop it and then kill the 1/1s with something else all on the same turn. Or they'll hit it with Rain of Arrows, they'll hit it with Capri. It's just not that great a card, but it kinda does what it needs to do. If you're running Raw and you have like Scarab's Blessing and you drop an Afterlife on it, it's marginally better. But there are just better things to give a blessing to. There are just better cards to play, so kind of dodge Decrepit Bowman if you can. Next up is Departed Warrior. Afterlife, draw a card. He's like a harpy. Sometimes his Afterlife will get silenced off of him if they want to keep you with a very tiny hand. So it's a little bit tricky to get value out of him sometimes, but he trades really well as a 3/2. A little bit easy to kill, but trades pretty well. And if you can, run the Elder Harpy, but if you really want to thin your deck, the Departed Warrior does alright. I used to run him in my 1-turn kill Odin just to ensure I always drew the combo. Next up is Doomspeaker. He's one of the strongest 3-drops. He's just a vanilla, but he's a 3/4. And having that 4 on his booty makes him decently hard to get off the board. He can trade with things like Brontes before it gets buffed. Doomspeaker can alter what they're going to play just a little bit by having so many hit points and coming out in the front row. Next up is Elder Harpy, and you're going to see Elder Harpy a lot. Her Warcry just straight up draws you a card, so she's excellent deck thin. She's a 3/2. She trades where she needs to. It's like you never even played a card really when you drop the Elder Harpy out, except you did and you're taking something off the board. She's good. You like her. You're going to run her. Next up is Imperial Archer, and oh man, whenever you play a spell, deal 1 damage to a random enemy. Newbie loves this card. She gets more value out of this than anybody. She plays so many spells so often that it's very hard not for her not to find value with the Imperial Archer. It's just really good for her. Otherwise, he's a little bit weak with his 1 attack. But you're going to love playing it. You're going to get a lot of value with it. Definitely grab it in Arena when you're playing Newbie. If you end up drafting a lot of spells with someone else, it's worth a consideration. Next up is Imperial Guard. Whenever you play a spell, gain +1/+0 and take no return damage this turn. Now, unlike the Imperial Archer, Imperial Guard fits into a couple extra decks. Taking no return damage is really good. He can buff multiple times depending on how many spells you play. So if you play the coin, that's going to buff him to 3/4 and he's going to come in and trade with something. He has 4 hit points, so he's a little bit awkward for people to remove. They can't just Tusky him, for example. So Imperial Guard's pretty good. Grab him pretty often. Definitely pick him up in Arena. He just does his job. Sacred Warrior. This is a card you're going to skip with most champs. The only champs that really get value out of this are Ra and Ganesh. The other champs just don't heal. But whenever friendly is healed, you draw a card. It's only a 1/4. It does have a bow in the card art, but it's melee, so don't let that confuse you. Being a 1/4 makes it a little bit hard for it to get that much value. But if you're playing Ra, you're playing Ganesh, it's pretty easy to pop this off, and it's cheap to get out, so you can sometimes Sacred Warrior and Pillar and try to refill your hand. Next up is Sellsword. You won't run into Sellsword that often. It heals your Summoning Stone for 3, but that's not going to stop the game from ending. It's not going to come out and answer anything, so it doesn't do too much. It just, maybe it takes a little bit of damage off of a early Odin game plan. 3/3 is a little bit better, but as we've seen from all the other 3-drops, most things, even some 2s, have 3 power, so it doesn't survive that much. Next up is Siege Master. Warcry, destroy 2 enemy structures. This is really, really good against Ganesh. He's a 4/1 archer for 3, so he kills a lot of things. You just have to be careful because he dies to Zablanc, he dies to Newbie's Spell Blades. He dies to a lot very easily. If you're playing it against Newbie, it's basically a dead card, unless maybe they played a Blade Forge and an Inferno Cannon for some reason. So be careful with the Siege Master. Probably pick something else before you put everything on 1 hit point. It even dies to Caldera Nova if you play it too close to a pit and they pull it in. So a lot of ways to kill it, but it has a lot of power to make up for that. Next up is Stirrups. He kind of has the same problem as the Siege Master. He is a 5/1 with stealth, so they can't directly target it. But Newbie has things like a Rushing Thunder. Bologna has Bacchus, which can attack all adjacent enemies. There are several ways to take the Stirrups off the board, and he does have a lot of power. You can sometimes get in there and get a very big swing in your favor, but you just have to be careful with it because it's so weak in the booty. Next up is Surtur, and Surtur you're going to see a lot, especially with Odin. Odin loves Surtur. You're going to see Surtur in ranked just because it has a charge, it's a 1/4, a little bit tricky to kill for most 3-drops, and it buffs everything. So Odin can make a 1/1 for 2 right beside his Surtur, and he can take out everything with 2 hit points. He can use 2 1/1s to kill a 4-drop. It's just a lot of value that's easy to find with Surtur. It's a really good card, and you're going to see it pretty often. You can also use it with the Thracian, for example, to make it a 4/3, and you can just start swinging. It's just really good. Next up is Tusky, and he is also one of the best 3-drops. Move to a random enemy unit and stun them. It's really good. It stalls for a turn. The stun lets you trade in for free. He finds a lot of value, and he finds that kind of value easily. It's a little bit of a gamble. If Ganesh has some structures and whatnot out, he might hit a pillar, so you have to be careful about that. Just cross your fingers and play Tusky, one of my favorite cards. Next up is the Wind Elemental, the final 3-drop, new to the game, Afterlife, add a random spell to your hand. And it's fun. You can get anything with this card. Sometimes you really miss, sometimes you grab an Annihilation. You just fist pump because it's so good. If you can squeeze it into your deck, or if you're playing Newbie especially, you're going to want a Wind Elemental. It's not too bad. It's a 3/3 for 3, so the stats are right on par for what you want for a 3-drop. And you just have to gamble with that spell, but it's like a card draw, except it's not even pulling a card out of your deck, so it doesn't even take you closer to fatigue damage. It's overall a really good card. Next up is Aegean Outcast, and you're going to run into Aegean Outcast pretty often. He sets up a lot of interesting trades. He takes advantage of a lot of things, and he also just kills structures. War Behemoth's a really good target for him if you're playing Odin, for example, because having a 3/6 and then changing it into a 6/3 lets you kill about anything, and then War Behemoth gets to draw a card. So there are just a lot of good plays that you can make with Aegean Outcast. If you need to swing 2 units at something that's too powerful, but like maybe you want to swing at a Siege Master, you have a Cupid, they have a Siege Master, you want to swing at it, you swap it to a 1/4, now your Cupid kills it and survives. So there's just a lot of good plays that you can make with Aegean Outcast, and he fits in a lot of spots. He's especially good in Arena. Next up is Carrier Behemoth. Whenever another friendly dies, deal 1 damage to the enemy's summoning stone. Carrier Behemoth's a little bit tricky. He's better in Odin, but he doesn't get too much value. He's good if you have an Aegean Outcast and you can swap it into an 8/1 and just take that to tower. That really hurts. You're kind of going to want to kill your units when you play the Carrier Behemoth just so you can activate that 1 damage as much as possible. It does help you rush to the end of the game, rush to lethal a little bit quicker. Just don't expect to stop anything with him. There are times where you're probably going to want to play a bigger threat than the Carrier Behemoth just to ensure that you have board control. Next up is Chow Fun. Chow Fun's really good. He's a beast, so he fits well into all the beast synergy decks. He's immune to melee, which is very powerful in this game. When you play a Chow Fun and they don't have archers or kill spells in Arena, you basically win. Putting a buff or 2 on him at that point really seals the deal. Chow Fun's great. You're definitely going to want to pick him. There are few cards that you'll pick over Chow Fun. Maybe if you already have one, you take like an Aegean Outcast or something like that. It just depends on what your deck's looking like it's weak against in Arena. But Chow Fun's always a very heavy consideration. Next up is Galas. Adjacent friendlies have immune to enemy spells. Galas is really good against Newbie. You don't see it that much in rank because there are several ways to play around it. Bellona, for example, she can just push it out of the way and then continue to use her burn spells. So it's really weak against Bellona, but against other champs like maybe Zeus or Newbie, you can find some value. He's only a 2/6, so he doesn't hurt that much. You're not really scared of him coming out, but he is a good card. He's the only card that gives immune to enemy spells, the only unit that does that. The only other thing you can play is like Celestial. Next up is Gladiator. Your leader ability costs 2 less. Everyone uses Gladiator. It gives you a free leader ability. If you're playing Zeus and you have Poseidon, you're throwing out Krakens for 1 mana. Gladiator's great. He's a 4/4 for 4, and he just makes your leader ability free. He's really good at chaining together some nice combos, for setting up, for going for lethal. There's just so many ways you want to play Gladiator, and you're going to take him with everybody in Arena. Maybe some of your ranked decks don't use them, but everybody in Arena is probably going to grab a Gladiator. Next up is Oogway, another beast, really fits in with the beast synergy, and he's really good. At the start of your turn, gain +1/+1, so he's essentially a 5/5 for 4, and he just keeps getting bigger and bigger the longer they don't answer him. Playing a Oogway forces them to drop a silence or come across the board and kill him, waste a kill spell. They have to have an answer for Oogway, or they start to feel really bad when he gets big. Rapacious Satyr. He's a 3/3 archer for 4, and enemy units spawned or deployed on the same row as Rapacious Satyr take 2 damage. Now, this gets newer players a lot more often than it gets experienced players, but sometimes we throw a card right into it because we're not thinking. It's not that bad. It's a 3/3 archer, so it kills the Chow Fun, and if you can get 3 of them out and just lock up all their spawns, it's really funny, but that's kind of a Hail Mary. The extra 2 damage is kind of neat. You can kill units with Afterlife on the same tile that the same row that Rapacious Satyr is on, and when they come back from Afterlife, there's 2 damage. So there are some interesting plays that you can make with Rapacious Satyr. Next up is Sagittarius. Spawn a random unit that costs 3 or less, and it is truly random. You could be pulling pillars with this. You can be pulling anything, and it's just a lot of fun. He's a 2/3 archer. He costs 4, but he makes up for it by pulling out that extra unit. And when you get a Fafnir with Sagittarius, you just scream with joy. It's so good. It's so good at times. Next up is Spartan. Adjacent friendlies have Protect 1. This will give Protect 1 to your tower, so you can use it to like protect against some Odin Rush, to win a couple extra trades that would kill your units otherwise. He's 2/6, so like Galas, he's not that powerful up front. It's more about the synergy he has with your board state. So not a bad card, not too great. He's better than some picks when you're in a pickle in arena. Stone Guardian, one of the best archers in the game, also a beast, so it really benefits from all that beast synergy that you can find. And he gains +1 range every turn, which is really hard to play around. You can just keep him in your back row for 2 or 3 turns and then just start chunking anything that you want. I'm a huge fan of Stone Guardian, so is everyone else. You're gonna use him, you're gonna like him, he's just a great card. Next up is Tomb Warden. The Afterlife, Tomb Warden becomes a 6/5. The weird thing about Tomb Warden is him hitting the board as a 1/1. He's extremely weak to silence. Thanatos can execute him and then you're not gonna get anything. So Tomb Warden's probably a card that you shouldn't pick up that often unless you can guarantee that you're gonna get that 6/5. Maybe you're Nuwa and you're just gonna blade it yourself. Maybe you're Raw and you're gonna put a Scarab's Blessing on it and try to make 2 Tomb Wardens. As Tomb Warden will make it the 6/5 and still come back as a 1/1 with the Scarab's Blessing. So there are a couple plays you can make with it, but it often gets ignored and played around pretty easily, so it's not that much value. But when you do get it off, it's a bit of a threat. Next up is Armor Behemoth. Whenever this unit takes damage, gain +3/+0. Armor Behemoth is really good with Nuwa, because she can hit it with her own spell blades and buff it up. It's good with Ganesh, because Ganesh can heal it constantly. That's kind of good with Ra, because it has enough hit points to soak a hit or two, and then ensure that you have a heal target for your other units. Getting +3 on every single swing means it grows into quite the threat. So it's not a bad card overall, but there are some better picks at the 5 slot, especially inside each Pantheon. Next up is Bull Demon King. Attacks hit all adjacent enemies. Bull Demon King is a lot of fun. Hitting all adjacent enemies sets up for some really good spots. We were talking earlier about the Siege Master and the Stirrups. He can swing through stealth. He can hit a Loki that's in stealth just by swinging at the tower. Bellona can push him over and take out a whole group of enemies. He hits everything all the way around him, front, behind, left, right. He does some damage. He has 6 hit points, so he stays on the board a little bit, and he's a beast, so he benefits from that beast synergy that we keep talking about. Overall, pretty solid card. You'll see him pretty often. Definitely in arena, a lot more than rank. Next up is the Dune Guardian. Whenever a friendly is healed, gain +2/+0. At 5 for a 4/6, he's a really powerful card. It's a really powerful ability, but you have to be running Ra or Ganesh if you're gonna get any value from him. The other champions can't really heal. Maybe they run a Wind Elemental and pull one, but they just can't really heal, so Dune Guardian's kind of a miss with them. You're gonna want to pick other cards instead of Dune Guardian unless you're playing, Ra or Ganesha. Next up is Fan Wei. He's immune to enemy spells, which is a fantastic ability. He's a 6 damage archer, which again, fantastic. The only downside is that 2 health. There's not a thing in the game that doesn't kill Fan Wei. Maybe an unupgraded Marksman or maybe a zombie. There's so few units that just don't kill him. So it's a little bit tricky to protect him. They can play cards like Shock, which just deal 2 damage because he's immune to spells, not to war cries, not to other units. So you have to be careful with him, but if you can get him out at the right time when they only have spells in their hand to answer him, he can do a lot of damage, and being ranged means it's a little bit hard for them to trade with him. Next up is Kong, and Kong is immune to ranged. We talked about Chow Fun being really good. Kong's alright. Being a 5-drop makes it a little bit awkward because there's a lot of good ranged units at 4 or above that he deals with very easily, but there are a lot more good melee units that just straight up take him out. He's not immune to spells, so it's really easy to remove him from the board with like an execute or a couple blades. His damage is really good, and he is a beast, so he does give you some of that beast synergy. You just kind of want to be careful about where you throw him out at because he's not too hard to answer, and you don't run into too many players who are playing like pure ranged units in arena. Whereas sometimes you'll find people who only have pure melee and Chow Fun just goes down. Next up is the Calm Warrior. Whenever another friendly dies, draw a card. This is one of the best draws in the game, especially if you're playing Ganesha or Puck or Odin. Anything that has a lot of very low cost units that die very often, the Calm Warrior can easily come out and find value. Be careful not to deck, like let's say you have a Khepri and 8 zombies out. If you Khepri and kill all 8 zombies, you're drawing 8 cards, so you have to be very careful not to fatigue yourself. If they see that you're about to deck out, they'll start killing your own units and leave the Calm Warrior up just to trigger that fatigue damage on you quicker. So play it at the right time, be ready to trade it out, but definitely don't be scared of getting value with it, because it's a pretty good card. Next up is Occult Deadeye, and you're going to see this one a lot. You're just going to run into Occult Deadeye all the time. Return a random god from your graveyard and reduce its cost by 1. It's really, really good in Arena. It lets you recycle that 1 of, 2 of god that you have and just keep applying pressure. You can pull Agni back with it. And the thing to note with the reincarnates, they'll come back in their final form. If they got silenced and they died in their first form, they'll come back in that. If they died in their second form after they've already reincarnated, they'll come back as that. So keep that in mind when you're trying to set up what you want to dig for, or just trying to figure out what you're going to pull with that. But Occult's really good. 5 mana for a 4/4 archer. Easy to find value with it. Its afterlife is really good. Even if they silence it, you get in a couple trades. Just a really good card overall. Poisonous Hydra. Add a poisonous card to your opponent's hand. Poisonous is your summoning stone takes 4 damage if this card is in your hand at the end of the turn. Poisonous Hydra is best right on curve. Like you mana pot into it, or you play it right when you hit 5 mana if you're going first. It's a beast, so it fuels a little bit of that beast synergy. The only downside is if you have like 10 mana and you play it, they'll just easily pay it off and they're not going to worry about it. It's only a 5/4, so it's not crazy tough. It is a melee unit. It's not crazy strong. There are probably better legendaries that you're going to have to choose from in Arena, and you won't really see it anymore in Ranked. I think it used to be a 4-drop and it got played fairly often, but now there are just better choices. It doesn't fit in with Fafnir, for example. So you don't run into it too often. It's not bad. It kind of gives you a little bit of tempo as long as you draw it right. Next up is Sookusu. Sooku is something you see when they're playing bees, especially in Arena. If you control another beast, Sooku has charge. He's a 5/3 for 5, and all the power lays in that charge. If you can, if you have a hyena or something out and you play Sooku, boom, there's a free kill. Lets you rush him with a little bit of extra damage. Suku's not bad. Just make sure that you have the beast. I wouldn't try to get it in Arena if I didn't have at least 4 or 5 beasts. Then I might really consider picking up the Suku or something else. Normally what I would go for is this guy right here, Venator Warcry. Give another friendly unit +2/+1. He's a better Scion of Doom. The +2/+1 sticks to him. Lets you change all of your units into just a bigger, badder threat. He's an archer at 5/3, so he kills things like the Suku that can't get to him. He's just a really, really good archer, and you're gonna want to be running Venator fairly often. It's just a fairly good card. Next up is War Behemoth, and War Behemoth is rapidly become pretty popular. He's 5 for a 3/6, and the 3/6 probably doesn't impress you that much, but whenever this unit takes damage, draw a card. So there are a lot of ways to get 2 or 3 or 4 cards off of this guy. Healing with Ganesh and just keep swinging with it. Using Khepri and poking it, using Zablanc on it, swinging at a bunch of low 1/1s and stuff, standing on top of a Caldera Nova Pit. There's so many ways to activate War Behemoth, and it really sucks for them to come in and trade with it, especially if they swing at it twice, because they're just giving you advantage in your hand, just giving you a bunch of extra cards, and it always sucks for them. It's good for you though. Next up is Baboon. He's a beast. He's a 3/7, and he's an archer, and he has guard. Guard means that they can't damage your tower with melee attacks. They can still hit it with spells, so they can still get through in some way. But Baboon kind of forces him to either silence or to come over and kill the Baboon. Having 7 hit points and being a ranged unit, there's no real safe way to do that. There are probably some better 6-drops that you're going to pick, but in a pinch, Baboon will do the trick. He's really good against Odin. That's the #1 consideration for Baboon. If you just feel like you're weak against Odin, then you might want to grab Baboon. Next up is Chieftain. Whenever another friendly dies, gain +2/+2. One of the best bombs. He comes out as a 6/5, but it's so easy to trade off a couple of your units right when you play him. And if you play him and then trade, there's no way for them to prevent that. They're going to have to execute it. They're going to have to silence it. And short of those spells, there's maybe a poisonous, but short of those spells, there's not many ways to deal with it because he just rapidly gets out of burn range. Apuk does wonders with him. Ganesh does really well with him. Odin does really, really well with him. Those are all 3 champs that just have a very easy time killing off tiny units of their own. Next up is Fury. Immune to return damage. It's a 6/6 beast. The beast synergy is very nice. The big thing about this guy is just being a 6/6 and immune to return damage. He can get over there. He can take out about any threat. And he's not going to take any damage back. They're still going to have to swing at him on your turn. If you get Fury out on an empty board and they can't answer it, that's normally game just from the sheer raw power of the card. And then we have Lernaean Hydra. Heals the Fool at the end of each turn. Whenever this unit deals damage, gain +0. It is a beast, but it's only 5/5 for 6. It does heal the Fool, so it does trigger a couple of those heal combos. But it's not as good as it used to be. It's alright, but there are a lot of ways to deal 5 damage in one turn. There aren't many things that it scares. There are a lot of burn spells that they can use. There are a lot of ways to just deal 5 damage and take it off the board. You're probably going to want to pick a class legendary over Lernaean Hydra, but it's not too bad. Next up is Satyr Pathfinder. Your opponent can only play 1 card per turn. This is really good. It only has 4 hit points, so again, it's not that hard to remove the card, but it does have 7. So even if they silence it, you have a huge beat stick. If you have board control and you play a Satyr Pathfinder, they get in a really, really rough spot because it just locks their hand down. Bologna, for example, can't delve and play what she delved on the same turn when Satyr Pathfinder's out. She has to kill the card, which puts her in an awkward spot of maybe wasting a burn spell and on him alone or on him or another unit that she didn't really want to. It shuts down Nuwa because she can't use multiple spell blades for Guan Yu. It messes up every single opponent in every way. Definitely worth consideration in Arena if you're not already top heavy. Next up is Blade Master. It's a 4/6 with charge, which is fairly good. Having charge is why it's so expensive. Charge is just very valuable. It has 6 hit points, so it can survive. It's just a little bit low on the power, but overall, fairly good card. You might pick it if you're a bit low on threat in Arena. You don't see it that often in ranked, just because the class legendaries and everything normally occupy those top spots. Maybe Bologna will delve for it occasionally. Next up is Brew. It's a 7/6 for 7 with Protect 2. Brew's really good, especially in Arena. Having Protect 2 and 6 hit points means it's pretty damn hard for people to trade with it. It can power its way through an archer or 2 to get across the board. It kills everything that only has 2 attack very easily. It can survive a couple swings from Chow Fun very easily. Brew's just pretty good. Probably worth picking up whenever you need a bomb. Here's Fire Giant. Fire Giant is probably the best neutral legendary. It's a 8 for 5/8, so it has a ton of hit points, it has some good damage, and it deploys 2 Fire Imps. The Fire Imps, we saw them earlier, they're 2/1s with charge. So you play him, you get a huge creature, and then you get to go straight to face or take out a threat with those Fire Imps. Fire Giant normally locks in a lot of games. He's worth it. Definitely pick him up. If you don't have him, craft him. You're going to use him with just about everybody. And finally, we have a Census. Now, he used to be a 3-drop. He just recently got buffed to 9/9, 4/9, and his ability got changed. At the start of your turn, move to a random enemy and attack it. This counts as a normal move and attack. He does prioritize units over the tower, so don't think you can play him and get lucky with the tower swing. He normally just goes straight for the units. You have to be careful if they have something like a Chow Fun out, because he will try to swing at immune to melee, and that will just waste his attack. So he's a little bit awkward. but he's a huge body, so there is some value there. Definitely, probably other things that you would want to pick over him. I would rather have a Brute instead of an Census, just so I can control how the Brute moves. But he's not too bad. He's really tough. It's probably best just to play Bologna and promote something into him. Like maybe your Fire Giant takes a swing in and goes down to 3 hit points. Then you could promote it for 1 into an Census, and that's a pretty good play. Fairly effective heal and makes a big threat. Thanks for tuning into this guide, guys. Make sure to tune in every single day on twitch.tv/doggodfroglog for more guides and gameplay.